At this sad time, many will be feeling the urge to give a tribute to Steve Albini.
Just remember that name, Steve Albini.
In this video, I'm going to give my tribute whilst also giving you my top 5 list of Steve Albini's best attributes in a hope that it'll be helpful for you with your music. Being that this is the Crafty Music Tips YouTube channel, I hope that they are helpful. The first one is something that I couldn't escape. I'm mentioning it first because every time I hear Steve Albini talk, I think, wow, what an articulate man. And this may seem really simple to you, but the power of being articulate knows no limits. So for instance, working with him would just be an absolute pleasure because of the efficiency of just knowing exactly what he means.
So T-Bone.
Yeah?
I'm going to play this for you from the beginning of the verse. And if you sing along so that you can get up to speed and get in tune, I'm going to drop you in just for the line of interest.
Nevermind is out. They're the biggest band in the world. They're looking to make their follow-up album. At that time, were you a fan? Were you a fan of Nirvana?
I wasn't super familiar with Nirvana. I had heard like the ubiquitous stuff that was being played on the radio and all the clubs, and like every gig you would go to, as you were loading in, the sound guy would put Nevermind on to crank the PA and balance the PA. So I had heard the album many times, sort of secondhand, right? I wasn't a student of Nirvana. I was familiar with their circle, like all the other bands in Seattle that they were like, compadres with, like the Melvins and the Mudhoney and all those other bands. I knew those bands and I was familiar with the sound, but I couldn't admit to being a fan. I became a fan of Nirvana through the process of working with them and seeing them in action firsthand, because I'd never seen them play live. If I'd ever seen them play live, I'm certain I would have become a fan.
Whoa, how's the word choices there? So, think about it. If you're sitting with people and you're talking about how initially you weren't a fan of them, that could potentially be really awkward. But Steve does it with absolute class. What a master. Now, think about this for you in your life. Are you really articulate? Are you very clear? Does everybody know exactly what it is that you're referring to? And also just in real life with the relationships that you have that aren't music related, there is no limit to how being articulate can be of help to you. So the next point, number 2, is that he doesn't let success or fame change his principles.
The decision is made. We would like Steve Albini to produce this record. And most people in that position would have said, please, 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 please. And you write this letter when you find out that they're interested. And this letter is not a please hire me letter. It's a great letter. It is I'll do it, but here are my conditions. It's a bit of a screed about what you believe, and I will do this if you do it on my terms and if you're willing to do it.
So ask yourself, what are your principles? What's really important to you? Would you be able to stick to them if somebody's dangling some fame, success, money, whatever, right in front of you? Are you able to stick to them? It's easy to say, oh, of course I would, but you're only going to know when you get to that potential situation. And so Steve Albini, throughout his life, sticking to his guns has definitely been an inspiration to me, which is a really good segue into the third point here, which is that he was not greedy.
And then you shockingly say, I'm not taking points on this record. You said, I want to be paid like a plumber. Just give me some money up front. But you thought it was immoral to get points in the record.
Yeah. The way that record producers and recording people are compensated at that time in particular was a trick of accounting that shifted the cost away from the label and toward the band, made the band ultimately responsible for whatever the producer got paid. And it didn't come out of the general proceeds of the record the way it would in an independent label's contract, for example. It came specifically out of the money that would otherwise have gone to the band. Like literally every dollar I would get paid would mean that was a dollar that Dave didn't get, or Chris didn't get, or Kurt didn't get. That's the way the accounting works in those kinds of deals. And I think that's ethically untenable. I'll admit that I think less of people who opt to do things that way. On its face, it's absurd. Like, I work on a record for a few days, and then for the rest of your fucking life, you have to keep paying me?
Well said there, Steve. Now, this is a great segue into the fourth point here about how much he values artistry. So I've heard a number of different interviews where he mentions how when he's doing audio engineering, he's not concerned about what his own thoughts are about the music that's coming out. What his opinions are secondary to him serving the artist, making sure that the artist is happy. And the only time he'll ever voice his opinion on what the music is sounding like and so forth is if they ask him.
So all of these aesthetic decisions and the technical and the practical decisions, like how many voices should we have in the backing vocal chorus? Should we cut that bridge out? Is that guitar solo too long? Like all of those decisions, all those artistic decisions are none of my business. I see my role as executing the technical aspect of the recording. And also, I feel like the person buying the record, the reason they're buying the record is that they have some sort of a relationship with the person making the record. They want to hear that person's ideas. They want to experience that person's creative output. And so I'm not interested really in manipulating that. I'd like them to have like the full suffer of whatever this person whatever kind of record they want to make. And in some cases, I won't even understand the kind of music that they're making. Like if I were to try to grasp their music, it might baffle me, right? So I would much rather let them make all of those decisions so that their expression, whatever they're doing for their audience, would be genuinely them rather than them mediated by me according to my fucked up tastes.
That was a big thing for me to learn, because if I'm ever in the audio engineering side of things, sometimes you think that you want to be helpful, but if they're not asking for your help, then chances are it's not being helpful. Now, he values artistry in many examples. Here is one.
In my experience, the advice that I've seen from the music's business side to compromise almost all has to do with changing something about the core behavior of the band, right? That is, don't quite be yourself so much. When the history and the evidence is that people respond most to music that's being made the most genuinely. That is, when the conduit between the performer and the artist is the clearest, when it's being the least fiddled with, when you're getting the most direct relationship with the person on the stage, that's where the bond is strongest. That's how the audience becomes like a dependable year after year audience. So I think the evidence is that there is no advantage to compromise. If you compromise and start doing things for business reasons rather than for the reasons that you got in a band in the first place, then people listening to the music can tell. They can tell that you're doing something that's not genuine. They can tell that you're doing something that is, for some external, either intellectual or business reason, and they will respond negatively to it.
Now, this relates a lot to the last point, our fifth, which is that he was honest. He was so honest, and his level of authenticity was never in question. Whether you agreed with him or not, you knew where he stood.
He was brutally honest. We'll say that there. He did not hold back.
Kurt had a cassette of the rough mix that Butch had given him of the Nevermind sessions. It wasn't the finished album that was in the stores. It was the cassette of the tracks that Butch had done without any like fanciful mixing, without any just like, these are the tracks. And he played that to get familiar with the sound of the studio. He played it through the speakers, and I thought it sounded fucking fantastic. Do you guys know do you remember that?
No.
I thought it sounded fucking great. And I don't remember, forgive me, I don't remember hearing the Nevermind album and thinking, well, this sounds fucking great. It didn't bring to mind any of the records that Butch had done that I was familiar with, that were the records that made his reputation and probably made Nirvana want to work with him in the first place.
So think about how you come across to other people. Are you very clear with who you are in the way that Steve Albini was? Or are you someone that you think you want to tell the person that you're talking to what it is that they want to hear? And then you're talking to somebody else with a different opinion and you're telling them what they want to hear. You know, Steve Albini, whether you agreed with him or not, his authenticity was so refreshing, at least it was for me. You knew exactly what he was thinking by the way that he expressed himself. And you never thought, is he actually telling me the way that it is? Sometimes it's good to develop, you know, an honesty versus tactful approach. And the great thing about Steve Albini is that, you know, when he needed to be tactful, he could do it because he was so damn articulate.
There's the truth and the truth.
And so let's recap. That was the first point. He was very articulate. The second was that he really stood by his principles. The third was that he wasn't greedy. The fourth was his value of artistry. And his fifth was his honesty. Did you learn something from those 5 points? Is there ones that I've forgot?
I mean, there are other things, but that's enough to get going.
Okay, so there's many things that I could say extra about Steve Albini that was really great. You'll notice that one of the things that I didn't mention was his level of quality, which I think that goes without saying, doesn't it? I mean, have you seen his list of credits? Check it out on Wikipedia. There is so many albums, so many recordings that he's been a part of. And so people wouldn't continually be asking for his services if he didn't have a high level of quality. Now, how does one attain that high level of quality? Lots and lots and lots of repetitions, but also having a very high care factor for doing a good job, which Steve Albini always did. Now, upon researching for this video, I didn't actually realize how much of a musician Steve Albini was as well. I knew of him more as a record producer and an engineer. It's interesting, he didn't actually like to be called a producer, which is interesting because he preferred the term engineer because he was there serving the artist, like what I mentioned before. And yeah, so I'm going to go out and check out a bunch of his music now because at a time like this, I feel like that it's very warranted in just delving into the life of a person that is sadly no longer with us. So I hope you enjoyed this video. There's a bunch of other videos here on the Crafty Music Tips YouTube channel that are hopefully going to be helpful for you as well. I'll just sign off by saying that with your music, you don't have to do every single thing right now. Just do the next thing. I hope that this was helpful. Steve, wherever you are, mate, thank you very much for the inspiration. I'll see you in another Crafty Music Tips video really soon. Cheers.